The views and opinions expressed by A Little Bit Culty are those of the hosts and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of the podcast. Any of the fucking amazeball content provided by our guests, bloggers, sponsors, or authors are of their opinion and are not intended to malign any religion, group, club, organization, business, individual, anyone, or anything.
We're not doctors, not psychologists, and we're certainly not the AP. That's Associated Press for those of you listening at home. We're two non-experts who found ourselves making a little podcast that people happen to like. Okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, everybody. Sarah Edmondson here.
And I'm Anthony Ames, a.k.a. Nippy, Sarah's husband, and you're listening to
A Little Bit Culty,
a.k.a. ALBC, a podcast about what happens when devotion goes to the dark side.
We've been there and back again. A little about us. True story. We met and fell in love in a cult. And then we woke up and got the hell out of Dodge.
And the whole thing was captured in the HBO docuseries The Vow, now in its second season.
I also wrote about our experience in my memoir, Scarred, the true story of how I escaped NXIVM, the cult that bound my life.
Look at us, a couple of married podcasters who just happen to have a weekly date night where we interview experts and advocates in things like cult awareness and mind control.
Wait. This does not count toward date night, babe. We got to schedule that. That's separate.
So there's 2 days we got to hang out?
We do this podcast thing because we learned a lot on our exit ramp out of NXIVM. Still on that journey, and we want to pay the lessons forward with the help of other cult survivors and whistleblowers.
We know all too well that culty things happen. It happens to people every day across every walk of life. So join us each week to tackle these culty dynamics, everywhere from online dating to mega churches and multi-level marketing.
This stuff really is everywhere. The cultiverse just keeps on expanding, and so are we. Welcome to Season 5 of A Little Bit Culty, serving cult content and word salads weekly on your favorite podcast platforms. Learn more at alittlebitculty.com.
Sinking down to the depths of the ocean, hanging on to it, my love. If I let go of it all, I could leave, but I know I won't.
This just in. Breaking news.
Thanks, Nip.
Is that?
That was really good. That was a really good sound.
Thanks.
Y'all, I can't. I can't.
Way to deliver.
I just can't.
What? It's your gig.
We can't speak about it, only just share that it's there. But there was a report dropped today. So by the time you hear this, it will be a week old. But for us today, we're recording on March 27th. And on the Frank report, Nikki Klein leaves a statement about leaving Keith Raniere.
Good for her.
You can imagine how we feel, and more to come once we are allowed to speak freely about it. Until then, we have, as promised, a lighter episode for all of you. This is somebody who had us on his podcast
Around Thanksgiving.
and we had such a good time. It ended up being a two-parter on his podcast, The Jordan Harbinger Show. But really, we just didn't want it to be over because we really appreciated him and his insights and his humor. We just didn't want it to be over. So we were like, damn it, I wish he'd been on a cult so that we could have him on our podcast.
When we first got out, Jordan Harbinger's podcast was one of the first I listened to because Stephen Hassan was on there. And Jordan did a really good job of explaining, and actually one of the few people who didn't really understand coercive control extended the empathy to understanding how it can happen, which I thought was really cool. So when we had an opportunity to be on his pod, I was like, yeah, he's a good dude.
So we reached out to him and told him this, like, I wish that you'd been in a cult. And he said he'd had this culty experience with self-help. And that's where his expertise lays. And I think, we've been promising one on a Schmanmark. I think what you're going to hear about his experience about a different group, it applies to all the LGATs. If you haven't heard that term, the Large Group Awareness Training Setup, which is what NXIVM falls under as well. And it's all the same shit, really. And we are going to do an episode down the road where we look at the history of all these groups and the main tenets like personal responsibility and all that stuff and how they all steal from each other.
And the groups that he was a part of are a little bit culty, right? They're not full on so it's good because he gets the precursors.
So a little bit about Jordan. If you haven't heard his show, we highly recommend it.
Jordan is a self-described recovering lawyer turned interview talk show host.
Yes, he used to work on Wall Street and now is a communications and social dynamics expert and was even once referred to as the Larry King of podcasting.
tough act to follow, I
I
think.
know.
His show has been top 50 iTunes podcast for over 14 years. So the guy has been doing this for a while. That's awesome.
On his show, he deconstructs the playbooks of the most successful people on earth and shares their strategies, perspectives, and practical insights with the rest of us.
Just so you guys know, we're not part of the most successful people on earth. I don't know if you guys need to know that, but we're not.
He also is, happily for us, a little bit of a cult expert now. We loved his episode with Amanda Montell, Stephen Hassan, like Nippy mentioned. He got like 800 episodes, so time to get caught up, everybody. But you can start here with this one and this little story about his foray into self-help.
Jordan Harbinger.
Hello, Jordan Harbinger.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
Welcome to A Little Bit Culty. Thanks for continuing the conversation.
Yeah, of course. I'm happy to be here. I have a little frog in my throat, so if my voice cracks, you have to edit it out. Otherwise, it's embarrassing.
We have those tools.
Yeah.
Absolutely, we can do
you
that.
have to perfectly craft your image when you're talking about fancy cults based on, it's funny because I was thinking about this today or earlier today, and I thought, if you're a cult leader, it's got to be pretty exhausting because not only are you playing volleyball at 4:00 in the morning with your cult, like you're around these people 24/7, you can't show any cracks. When do you be yourself? And the answer is, I don't know, like never really? Or does yourself not exist anymore because you're swallowing it all the time? I know I just dove right into the deep end and the reading, but I'm curious.
And I have answers to that. Sarah, you want to go first?
I think on the couch, when you're on the couch playing Led Zeppelin to the young
15-year-old
new
girl?
ones coming in, the
Yeah.
15-year-olds, like that's when you can probably be yourself because they don't have an expectation of you yet.
True.
Maybe then.
Well, I'll say this. I mean, the persona that we caught Keith with in the footage of the vow and all that stuff was like, who is that dickhead?
Mhm.
Like I never saw
We didn't see that.
what a dick he was in the recordings, with Allison Mack. Like he was like a little bit brazen about it. And I never saw that. So I think that's who he really was. And then when he's in front of the rest of the organization, he was the guru or whatever the fuck you want to call
Yeah,
it.
that makes sense. I guess if you put all the footage together, because it's hard when you're watching the vow that you go, oh, everybody who was in the cult saw the same perspective as I'm seeing right now watching this show. And that's not really the case, right?
Yeah.
Correct.
Which doesn't help us.
No, it's like, how stupid are you? Look at him. He's on a recording. And you're like, I wasn't there. I didn't watch this. This is edited by HBO. They had to go through 4,000 hours of Keith playing volleyball to get this.
At least 4,000. I think it was more than that. I think they said they had 2 or 3 years worth of footage or something like that.
Imagine being like your first day at HBO and they're like, you're on this show called The Vow. It's about cults. You're like, yeah. And they're like, you're going to watch this tool bag play volleyball in his 70s gear for 17 days straight for 12 hours a day with no
They
breaks.
probably needed therapy. They needed therapy for sure. I hope they got therapy too.
Yeah.
They all hate volleyball too. Everyone fucking hates volleyball now. Like he didn't do volleyball. His volleyball was struggling as it was, but it's fucking dead.
I will
now.
never play volleyball again, ever. And that's just my journey. But anyway, this is about you, Jordan. And for our listeners who haven't listened to our episode, and obviously we've encouraged them to do that, but we just had such a great time on your show because, we've done a lot of press. Not everyone gets it. People want to get it. And they're, like, so why do people join cults? And you just, because of your, what is it now, 700 and something episodes, you've done so many podcasts.
Yeah, something like that.
Talked to so many cult survivors, so many experts, so many psychologists. I mean, some incredible people from around the world, but specifically on this topic, you have this like library of information. How'd you get so intrigued in the concept? What happened in your life? It's our turn to turn the questions on you.
I think initially, so I was doing my show creatively titled The Jordan Harbinger Show. And yes, I thought of that myself. I got I do a Friday advice segment called Feedback Friday, and I got a lot of questions from people that were like, I was in a cult. It was a weird sex cult, or it was just a weird church that was a little bit or a lot, turned up to 11. Or I never realized I grew up in a cult, or my parents joined a cult. And I was like, how pervasive are these things where I'm getting a letter every 2 weeks about somebody who was, or is getting recruited to a cult? Because when you're not in a cult and you're not around cults, you think cults are so rare. There's 1 or 2 going on in the United States at any given time, maybe, in that, like Waco, Texas style. You don't think that your neighbor who won't shut the fuck up about her MLM is in a business cult. You don't think that your churchy friend who went a little bit overboard after going to a camp one summer is now in the cult version of whatever sort of previously sort of healthy church they were in before. You don't think that the person who joined a self-help group who is now just totally into it is also in a cult. You basically expand your definition of cult, but not so ridiculously that everything is a cult, because that's the problem, right? Is people go, oh, everything's a cult now. Look at Peloton. And it's like, well, you can be a super fan of Peloton. You can be a super fan of SoulCycle, but SoulCycle instructors aren't like, if your friends don't support your SoulCycle, you should just murder them or like leave them or isolate yourself from them or lock yourself in a SoulCycle studio for 2 years voluntarily because you're a bad person. Like, they don't do that. There are degrees here, but your definition of cult has to expand. And then I got interested in the psychology. And then I want to say like a year after that, a friend of mine, or a former friend of mine, who is kind of a popular, and still is kind of a popular like influencer dude bro, was like, you got to join this leadership class. It's amazing. So I go to this leadership class and it's just really coercive, loads and loads and loads of bullshit, really controlling, up at 6 o'clock in the morning, there till 2 o'clock in the morning. Anybody who speaks up gets kicked out. And I'm like, this is so weird, because I've been to a ton of personal growth seminars, learning workshops. This is run totally differently. And I think on like day 2, I go, okay, this is extremely coercive. And some of it looks like it's for sales. They're programming us to buy the next thing. So I get that. But also they're really filtering for control. And stop me if I'm getting too in the weeds too quick here. But like,
no, this is great.
I go to this intro seminar. A lot of the people there are from the same influencer. And I'm like, that's weird. This guy recruited like 40 people to join this. That's like odd, or 20. And then the instructors were like untouchable. The waivers were 80 pages long. Everybody who worked there was a volunteer, AKA had just taken the program like 3 weeks prior to that and was now working there for free. And I was like, that's odd. / culty. Now that I think about it, red flag. And then it was like, there was a guy there who was a surgeon and his phone dinged. And they were like, we told you no phones. And he's like, here's the problem. I'm a surgeon and I'm on call. And they were like, well, you can't be on call during this. And he's like, okay, well, I have to leave because I'm on call and I'm a literal brain surgeon. And they were like, you need to know how to make choices about your life and da-da-da. And he's like, excuse me, I am a brain surgeon who is on call. This means somebody might die. What are you talking about? And they were like, well.
Good for him.
And then he kicked him out. And I was like, what the actual fuck is going on here? So the next day he actually came back and I was shocked.
Wow.
And he's like, and they were like, okay, your phone's on vibrate. We made a special arrangement for him because he's a surgeon. And I'm like, how did you not even before just go, oh, okay, please turn it on vibrate so it doesn't disturb other people and sit in the back in case you need to take a call. They made a big show of dressing him down. And so he stepped out to take a call. He stepped out to take another call. It wasn't disruptive at all. The guy was not he didn't look like a strong person, but he clearly was a very sort of like, what would you call it? Like a thinker who doesn't get influenced by outsiders in a way that's negative too easily.
A brain surgeon.
Yeah, you call it, brain surgeon. An independent thinker and a critical thinker. And they were like, tomorrow we're going to be here till 2 to 4 o'clock in the morning. I don't have to warn you, but since a few of you complained about how late we were up, you got to get your child care in order. And like some of the women and guys that were there were like, I can't do this. My wife or husband is not going to take care of 2 kids till 4 o'clock in the morning. You said we'd be done by 6 or 7. And they were like, well, you can leave. So those people left. And the surgeon guy was like, I can't. I actually have a scheduled surgery tomorrow at like 5 a.m. And it's like, this person is in trouble. I'm going to be late. And they were like, that's unacceptable. And he's like, you guys are fucking crazy and you're stupid if you don't understand why this is important. So they were like, you're being uncoachable. And he's like, fine, I'm uncoachable. I'm not going to skip a brain surgery for you morons. I'm out. He didn't say that, but that was the vibe that we were all getting. Yeah. And I remember being like, dude, of course. How am I the only person that seems to agree with this guy? And I'm looking around and people are like, uncoachable. And I was like, how dumb are the people that I'm sitting with? So during some of the breaks, I was like, hey, how about that surgeon guy who had to leave? And it seemed like almost everyone was like, yeah, that guy, I'm glad he's gone. And I was like, I don't know about that. I mean, isn't he sort of like exactly what you would want in a seminar group? He seems smart. He's obviously successful. He's got his priorities straight. The leadership did not want that guy in there. And the more this thing went on, this is only 3 days long, the more people's wounds kept getting ripped open. And I'm like, this is not a leadership seminar. It has nothing to do with business. It really doesn't. It seems to be like ham-fisted the first part of therapy where they sort of like gently guide you to open up. It's that, but they're using an industrial winch to rip everybody's wounds open. And I'm like, they're not going to have time to put everybody back together. And that was naive of me to say, because actually that was never the plan. The plan was only to get people to be so fucked up and vulnerable that they were literally crying the whole time in each other's laps or whatever, which is incredibly uncomfortable, but also totally unnecessary. And then to go, oh, and by the way, we're going to button everything up in the advanced course, which happens to be next weekend, and you can pay right now and get a discount. And I was like, this is so fucking manipulative, dude. And it was crazy because here's just one example of many. It's like 11 p.m. or midnight, and it's like, go call somebody who wronged you deeply in the past and tell them you forgive them. And I'm like, should this be done with absolutely no context whatsoever? Should this be done with absolutely no support whatsoever other than like a buddy in a group you're in that you just met yesterday? And so people were doing shares. I obviously just didn't do that because I'm like, I'm not calling a stranger with no instructions other than to forgive them. And then like ... Hugo from Mexico, the coach here, is going to tell me what to do next. I don't think so.
Right.
And also there were so many red flags with this coach. Like he kept bragging about how rich he was. And I'm like, everybody, this is his job and he's bragging about taking our money. Is this professional? No. You know, It was so ridiculous. And so the other things that people were doing were like, oh, we did a share after we were supposed to call somebody and forgive them. Like he was like, literally go out to your car, get dinner somewhere, and then like while you're out there, call someone and forgive them. And I'm like, shouldn't this be kind of shouldn't there be more breathing room for this? Shouldn't this be guided by somebody? Shouldn't you know what we're forgiving? None of that fucking mattered because the point was to rip open a big wound by having you talk to somebody who had wronged you in the past and just stir up that pot. So women were like, I called my uncle who I haven't spoken to in 20 years who molested me when I was 8. And I'm like, dude, what the fuck? And then the girl started crying and she's like, and I just couldn't forgive him. And he started crying and apologizing. And now I feel worse because he actually gaslighted me and saying that he didn't do it, but that he's sorry that I'm upset. And my aunt got on the phone and started yelling at me. And he's like, you didn't follow the instructions. You were supposed to forgive that person. And she's like, I can. He molested me. And I'm like, you're such a piece of shit, dude. This girl needs therapy. You ripped open this wound. You have absolutely no qualification to help her with this problem. And you are mad at her because she's rightfully upset that she confronted an abuser who she was absolutely not prepared to talk to, stirred up a family issue with her aunt now, who's like probably on the phone with her mom being like, your crazy bitch daughter's fucking with my marriage. You know, like that was part of the problem that she was having. I was extremely angry about that because this girl was so hurt. And there were many stories like this. That was one of the worst ones because that girl happened to be behind me and I was talking with her all at lunch. She was a super nice person. And there were a lot of stories like that. And just people who are like, I don't talk to my brother because he's a drug addict. And then he died a couple of weeks ago and I haven't processed it. And they're like, forgive yourself. And it's like, okay, I guess so. And the right answer is I forgive myself. But of course you don't because you haven't done any of the actual work. So these people are all a mess, crying. It's terrible. And I'm just thinking, this was so ham-fisted that it can't be anything but deliberate. This guy, this fake-ass coach, could not have expected everybody to walk in and be like, wow, I feel so good that I just forgave this terrible thing. There's no way that this hasn't happened before where people go, yeah, that was a terrible idea, and then get yelled at because they didn't follow the instructions and make this coach look good because he's been doing this for years and years and years. There's just no way this is the first time this has gone wrong. And additionally, like this stuff coupled with who hasn't signed up for the advanced course yet? You need to go do that now. It's $500 off if you run into the next room. And then it was like those people would leave. And then he'd go, everybody who hasn't signed up yet and isn't in line to sign up, can you move forward? I'm tired of yelling. And I'm like, well, you have a microphone and this is day 3. So I don't believe you. Just turn the volume up. And then he'd be like, how many people have financial issues? And a bunch of people would raise their hand, which first of all, you're selling something to people who can't afford it. So fuck you. But also then he'd go, okay, what if we give you a payment plan? And they'd be like, okay. And he's like, okay, then you can go into the other line and tell them you need a special payment plan and we'll accommodate you. And then it's like everybody else move forward. And now there's like, it's gone from 200 of us or 100 of us to like 12 of us, including me. And he's like, well, the rest of you, I want to know what the issue is. And I'm like, why are you bringing us up into your face so you can literally get into our psychological space and pressure us? And of course, the first few people that he picked were like the most timid looking people. And they were like, I don't know. I feel like I can't afford it, but I don't want to get on a payment plan because I have a lot of debt. And he'd be like, okay, here's the thing. You need to make choices about what's important in life and give you that whole spiel about like, if you're not choosing yourself, if you don't go into $3,000 in credit card debt to, pay for this stupid advanced course. And then for guys like me, I'm sitting there with my arms crossed and he's like, others of you, I'm sure, have other issues, but we don't have time to get to them all right now. And because I was like, ask me, motherfucker, what my issue is right now. Ask me.
Yeah.
I fucking
would have loved
dare
to
you
have
to
seen
ask me
that.
what my issue is right now.
Yeah.
And I will open your ass up. And I know he was very experienced. And he was like, I'm skipping that guy because that guy is not going to take any of my shit.
Yeah.
And he's going to make me look bad.
I mean, I don't know how long ago this was. Do you like a timeline? 5-10 years ago?
This is probably like 7+ years ago, 8 years ago.
Yeah, you were too solid.
Yeah, he could see it. He didn't fucking ask me anything for 3 days. He looked at me and was like, the person next to Jordan, like he did not like me one bit.
You asked the question when you were going through your rants of like, he had to know it was deliberate. And that's the whole thing that I kind of feel like, with the questions, how they're set up, like this is a deliberate thing to get people to feel like shit. So they're dependent on whatever it is that they're doing.
For sure.
And if you have buy-in and you're susceptible to that.
It became so obvious that what was happening was create the problem so that you can become the solution. And it wasn't like this person helped this girl get molested when she was 8. It's just that he was filtering for baggage in people. And I use baggage, I know it's kind of an unkind term. He was filtering for damage in people that he could exploit. And when he found somebody who was extremely damaged, he would take this psychological screwdriver and start scraping that out as much as he could. And I was like, this is so unkind and callous. And he's not doing any of it with love or compassion. He's doing it from this very arrogant, up on stage, I know everything and you know nothing and how dare you question me kind of attitude. And I'd been to therapy before and I was like, this is not how this is done. This is not done in 10, 15 minutes from a stage with a microphone in front of 125 people. This is done over a period of weeks or months on a couch in a very private, caring environment with a nice person who genuinely cares about you and stops when you are crying so hard that you can't breathe and doesn't go, this is, you're crying because you know that you are also at cause, which AKA is how they blame you for every problem that's happened to you. And that was one of the principles, and I put that in air quotes, of this organization was that everything that happens to you, you are either at effect or at cause. Does this sound familiar? This sounds like a NXIVM thing too.
Oh, yeah.
Verbatim.
Yeah.
Yeah. All of these self-help groups are like that.
Yeah. So like this girl who got molested, this guru leader guy had to go through the mental gymnastics of trying to convince us that somehow this girl who was 8 years old at the time was at cause. And it was really disgusting to watch because he's like, this guy, of course he has mental issues for molesting you, but like, how were you in that position? And I'm thinking, because her parents and family let her down. She was 8. I wanted to rip his throat out in front of the whole group. I swear to God. I've never experienced anything like this that was so vile. I remember it 8 years later like it was yesterday because it was so horrific. And there was a lot of that. And I just thought you are exacerbating people's problems so that you can become the solution, so that you can make money. You're not doing it because you care about solving this girl's problem. He wasn't even teaching the advanced course or anything. He was just generating revenue because he got a cut of everybody who bought. I'm 100% sure of this. Find out later, all these coachy guys were freelancer dudes who worked for a lot of different culty, different things. I can't remember how I found that out. Through somebody who had done even more advanced stuff, was like, how come Hugo from Mexico, who was teaching the intro course to the thing, it was an offshoot of this cult called LifeSpring that's now called MITT, and I'm not afraid of putting them on blast because they're a bunch of bullshit. How come that guy is now teaching another intro seminar for another culty group for another, and in a totally different place in a totally different time with a totally different name? And the answer is either because the holding company is the same, or these sort of salesy guru cult guys just rotate around. I really don't know, but they're not just with the group.
Yeah. We've had a number of people ask us to do an episode on LifeSpring. We haven't done it yet, but from the little research I've done, is that the LifeSpring and EST, and Scientology and NXIVM, it all comes from the same well of original teachings from the 70s and 80s and the human potential movement that then birthed all these other subsets. Like people broke off and started their own thing, and it's all the same shit.
And thought they could do it better.
Or they just got sued into oblivion, right? Because didn't some of these
Yes,
groups get
that also
sued so
happened.
much that they were like, ooh, we got to close the group down. And other people are like, well, if this is closing, I'm taking my IP of how I rip people off and screw them over.
Yes.
And I'm going to be the guy at the top of the pyramid now. And the other person's like, well, I'm not going to work for you. So then they just started these other organizations and basically
Yes.
took the handbook home and printed off a new cover. And that was that.
Yep.
Pretty much. Yeah. Did you ever confront your friend your bro coach friend who invited you?
No, he's actually a total moron in many ways. I mean, he's a very successful influencer guy, but I realize now that he's a completely damaged dude, and I don't think for a second he has the self-awareness to realize or understand or give a shit about any of this.
Mm-hmm.
Shortly thereafter, he started his own live events, which were not this, but were also just please worship me levels of ego for him. And he's completely addicted to that. And it was very odd because, and I hate putting people on blast like this, and I hate sort of questioning somebody who might be a victim, but he also came out with the whole I was abused as a kid thing right after Ellen did and a bunch of other celebrities were doing it. And then he never talked about it again. And I'm like, okay, so did that really happen? And the only reason I'm questioning it is all of us other guys that were close friends with him at the time were like, hey, I think that might just be bullshit. Because his sister, who I know, never said anything. His brother, who I know, never said anything. They never reacted to this. Like, did it happen? Or is this just like a thing he did to get close to celebrities because he announced it like at the same time? And so we were just sort of like, that's weird. And there's all these other things where we would tell him a story and then it would like end up in his book as something that happened to him. And we're like, but
Yikes.
that was my
Jesus.
story or my like thing that didn't happen to you. Like the odds of you having that same thing happen to you are almost zero. Why is my story in your book? So I realized this guy has like no actual personality of his own. He's just like a weird Frankenstein of other people's life stories. And I'm like, I don't even think I know you. I don't think you're a real person. I think you're just like a collage of people that you know that you think are interesting and admirable, and it's fucking weird. I don't want to be friends with you.
Yeah, good call. Sounds like a bit of a grifter also.
He's definitely a grifter, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah, it checks those boxes. We had a similar situation with someone that was supportive of us and told our story, and then people reached out to us and said, boom, 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 kind of what you were saying. And even when I go back and look at my interactions with this person, I don't see it in that.
Oh man, we thought we had a real ally, and then a mutual friend was like, "Dude, he's such a shyster." I don't know if you know who that is.
I have no idea, but I'll forget I even heard the name.
Point being is that, he's charming, and then to hear the flip side of it, we hadn't encountered that yet. I've only had 2 or 3 face to face with him, and he was super supportive, super like, yeah, man, yeah, and so yeah, to your point, they kind of have they check those boxes of who are they, and then the charisma.
Oh, I remember my original point. This guy's a perfect cult recruiter, right? Because he, 1, doesn't really care about other people. 2, only really cares about his image in the eyes of other people. So if he can get clout with a cult by recruiting for the cult, there he goes. 3, he figured out some of what they were doing. None of the deep stuff, just the fact that they were making money on events and how the events were kind of run. And he copied that model, not to great success, but to decent enough success. And I realized like, aha, this is a perfect guy for them because he doesn't really understand what's going on, but also only cares about people kind of is about how much money he can make from them and whatnot and how they make him feel in terms of like his narcissistic itch and tendencies. So they're almost filtering for those kinds of folks too, but they come in, they're rare birds for this kind of organization. And that was one of my experiences with a cult. I didn't realize it was a cult at the time. But after talking with people years later, it's funny because I made a note. I was like, where are these people going to be in a year? Because they're like, this is my new life, whatever. And I was like, I want to make a note to email this person in a year. And I did. I wrote everything down and I put it on my to-do list app called Todoist, which I highly recommend. And it pops up a year later and I'm like, I'm going to reach out to this person. Oh, yes. So I'll give you background on one of the other people in there if this is interesting to you.
Yes,
so
please.
I want to omit personal details. She was an entrepreneur, mildly successful, not some like super successful entrepreneur, but she was a strong woman and she had to leave she wanted to sign up for this advanced course, right? But she had to leave a day early because her best friend was getting engaged and she was having a party. And she's like, I have to go to the engagement party because if I don't go, my friend's going to be mad at me. And they were like, well, she's going to have to deal with that and you're going to have to learn how to deal with that. And she's like, no, I've actually been a really terrible friend. I've known this girl since high school. I missed her graduation. I missed her big event this, big event that, big other event, you know, whatever. Or it was a baby shower and she missed the engagement and the wedding and all this stuff. She was supposed to like stand up in the wedding. And so this girlfriend was like, screw you. You're supposed to be one of my best friends. You never come to any of these big events because you always have like business and whatever. And they were like, you need to choose yourself. And this girl was like, no, I have to go. I have to go. I have to go. And they dressed her down in front of the whole group to the point where she was like, okay, I guess I have to go to the advanced course. She ended up going, I followed up and I was like, you didn't go to the advanced course, right? You told them to go fuck themselves and you went to your friend's wedding, baby shower, whatever it was. And she was like, no. And I was like, dang, you actually bought in and went to the advanced course. And she's like, worse, I stayed with the organization for over a year after that. And I'm now suing them because what this organization does, and this will surprise nobody who listens to A Little Bit Culty, what they do is you go to the advanced course, then you go to these other sort of like workshop-y, you know, skill courses where somebody teaches you absolutely nothing but gets your money, I'm sure. Then they have what they call a PhD program, which is hilarious because it's not an accredited university or school of any kind. And the PhD program, you spend the bulk of your time calling people who took the beginner program and or the advanced program and learning how to sell this program to them. By the way, for free, not even for free, you're paying to be in this program. So you're learning sales skills and persuasion skills by selling their shit for them for free for a long time. And that's part of your so-called PhD is just this manual labor that you're doing or like this knowledge, you know, free labor that you're doing. And so this woman sued them and was like, I realized I just got enslaved and I need to be paid for that because I sacrificed a lot of income opportunities to like sit there and cold call idiots. And I'm like,
oh,
yep.
but she learned sales. Oh,
Yeah.
she learned sales.
Right. She's like, I already knew sales. I was a salesperson.
This is the golden age of cult recovery. The more we speak up and share our stories, the more we realize we are not alone. Your voice and your story can empower others. This is Sarah, and I'm proud to be a founding collaborator of the #IGotOut movement. Learn more at igotout.org.
The Frankies were a picture-perfect influencer family, but everything wasn't as it seemed.
I just had a 12-year-old boy show up here asking for help. He's emaciated. He's got tape around his legs. Ruby Frankie is his mom's name.
Infamous is covering Ruby Frankie, the world of Mormonism, and a secret therapy group that ruined lives. Listen to Infamous wherever you get your podcasts.
This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. What are your self-care non-negotiables? Maybe you never skip leg day or never miss yoga. Maybe it's getting 8 hours of sleep. I mean, that's my personal and everyone's dream, isn't it? Well, I definitely have some non-negotiables. Like I'm in Vancouver right now and I'm spending literally as much time as I can outside in nature. #cold pools, #crushing it. Nature is a non-negotiable. Not enough time in the fresh air and the trees around me and I start to feel not great, not myself, not grounded. Therapy day is a bit like my nature walks. I try to not miss it, and I know I'm just going to feel so much better all around if I make it a priority. I get so much out of it. It helps me put my worries and anxieties in their rightful place and helps me clear my mind so I can focus on what I really need and sometimes what I don't need. Like, I don't need to be overbooking myself just because I hate to say no to people. You know what I mean? Thanks, therapy. Thanks for helping me see that. And if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire and get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Look, even when we know what makes us happy, it's hard to make time for it. But when you feel like you have no time for yourself, non-negotiables like therapy are more important than ever. Never skip therapy day with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/culty today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/culty. I'm biting my tongue. I'm biting my tongue for 3 reasons. One, that also happened in NXIVM, and I didn't remember it until you said it. They called the Stripe Path, becoming a proctor, as a practical MBA program.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
And so I'm like embarrassed as I'm saying this, obviously, but this is, that's what we do here. And 3, one of my final red flags before leaving is that they created the university program in NXIVM. And we've not talked about this much, Nip. People went to Albany for $5,000 a month.
Wow.
To retake all the stuff that was in ethos, which was, by the way, like $300 a month. So to retake the $300 a month curriculum and also go to university, and we were supposed to fill that, and I was like, okay, I'll fill it.
No,
but
it
it's
got
not
absurd. It got absurd to
so
people
absurd.
in it.
Anyway, so that's what I was remembering as you're talking. So anyway, so she sued them. She didn't go to the shower. She didn't go to the shower, which also is painful.
Yeah, I said, whatever happened to your friendship? She's like, still like irreparably damaged because she skipped all of this person's life events. Like she missed the graduation, the engagement, the wedding, and the baby shower. And it's like, this is her supposedly best friend. I mean, when you miss all of that stuff, your friends start going, okay,
it's hard to repair.
You just don't care about me.
Yeah.
Because something always comes up. And it's like, well, that's a reasonable assumption,
Mm-hmm.
It's such a painful regret. I've missed 2 of my best friends' wedding, and a very similar thing of what you just explained, where I was like, well, I guess it would be unethical for me to attend those things when I'm committed to my growth. So going to a wedding, I'd just be satiating, which was what they would call it.
Sarah, also there's a component too of like, because we were always doing this, we didn't nurture friendships for however long. It's not.
Yeah,
it wasn't
we
so
weren't
much
around.
that we were missing
We
their
weren't
life
even-
events. I wasn't talking to people that I went to school with and had relationships with. I was off doing the Lord's work, kind of, and so that sucks.
Well, we were building humanity. They
Yeah.
were not building
Yeah.
humanity.
We were actually doing the opposite.
So you have this experience. Did you end up finishing it, or did you like duck out early?
I finished that intro course because another friend who had taken it and highly recommended it was like, just finish the intro course. So I did. And he's like, you should do the advanced course. I haven't done it yet. It's going to be awesome. Let's take it together. And I was like, okay, maybe if I have time. And then a few months went by and my friend got into financial difficulties. And I was like, okay, I'll just wait for you, because I didn't want to lend him the money. I was like, it's a bridge too far. And then after a few months, he was like, it's weird. All these people from this intro thing that I thought were going to be friends for my whole life, none of them talk anymore. They don't talk about this stuff anymore. Also, I feel like that was just a weird thing. And I was like really sort of into it for a minute. And then I was like, yeah, your high faded. And that's why they try and sell you on the next weekend, because your high is at peak when you're still there at the end of the course. And then it wanes quickly. And I know this from training seminars, because you always want to sell the next thing for any training seminar as soon as the first one ends, because that's when people are like, this was great, let's do it. It's easy to prioritize. You don't want to wait 3 months and be like, want to rearrange your life again for another weekend and find childcare? Because people are like, oh God, I said it was great, but I just can't. So he just was like, oh, that's weird. And then he was like, the more I think about it, the more I'm like, everybody who worked there had just taken the program like 1 or 2 weeks before that. Nobody had been there. Like, where are all the people that have been there for like 3, 4, 5 years? Where are those people? And I'm like, they don't fucking have those people, dude. Those people ducked out maximum 18 months later after getting milked in their so-called PhD program, where they're filling out flyers or handing out, documents and working for free. Like, that's what this is. It's a freaking pyramid cult thing. And he's like, yep. And now we laugh about it because he's like, I can't believe we fell for that. And I'm like, well, you sold it to me as a friend, but you did fall for it.
know.
And he didn't know, because we got sold as a leadership course. And we were like, this is so weird. And there were some interesting self-helpy sort of things to it. We're like, oh, that's an interesting way to look at this problem. Oh, that's an interesting way to look at yourself. The thing for me was, if it was sold like that and run like that, I would have been like, this is cool. I'm going to take the advanced course. The stuff that unsold it for me was, oh, look at how damaged this person is. Let's dress them down in front of the whole group and make them cry, and not let them sit down, and not let them leave, and not let them go get a tissue, and not let them go to the bathroom and compose themselves. And I was like, this is just really shitty and manipulative. And then the final nails in the coffin were using people's damage and things that they had expressed before and their financial difficulty, and using that to sell them the next thing specifically. I was like, this is just a company that doesn't fucking care about anything but money at all. And the people who run this are, I won't say evil, but they're a step next to that, because this person knows that she can't afford that. This person knows that she's going to lose a friend if she does this, and they just don't care, because the extra $500 or whatever the cost was is worth more than this person's feelings and friendships. And I was like, that's really ice cold, man. I don't want to be around this.
You just mentioned so many of the red flags that we talk about. I'm curious, do you know if that group is still still functioning?
I don't know. Let me Google it right now.
Yeah, let's Google it. Let's find out.
Here it is. Oh, the first autocomplete is MITT Mastery and Transformational Training Cult. That's the first autocomplete. Is MITT a cult is the first result. February 26, 2020. That's so funny. And it's a Medium blog. What is the MITT cult? Oh my God. Well, the website still exists. Teen Mom 2 star Leah Something joins MITT cult. In Touch Weekly. Yeah, there's a whole lot anti-MLM Reddit. MITT question mark? Yeah, this is either still going on. Oh, that's an old post. So the website, yeah, it still exists. Discover your highest potential. Hear what graduates are saying about how MITT has improved their careers and personal lives. Normally, I'm afraid to name check places, but I'm honestly like, go ahead and sue me because discovery is going to be fun. As an attorney, I'm like, yes, let's get all your documents.
Bring it. Nippy and I are always joking / the irony of like, imagine if we got this far with Nexium and then we get sued by like some random other small personal development cult because of the fucking podcast.
Yeah. Well, now, like
Could
before,
happen.
I was like, "Ooh, I don't want to get sued. Getting sued, even when you're right, is expensive." Now I'm like, I've got a moderate degree of financial success. It would actually be quite entertaining for me and a buddy who's a lawyer and maybe an anti-cult activist to get sued by this group and be like, "This isn't defamation. I am speaking purely on my personal experience, but let me prove it to you by issuing a mountain of discovery requests and interviewing a bunch of other victims and preparing a massive presentation that is going to absolutely torpedo your entire organization. Or you can drop the lawsuit, but let's not do that because I have a lot of free time right now. And as an attorney, I'd love to dust off the law degree. And yes, I can afford the help. So please, please sue me. Let's do this."
I forgot that you had a law degree.
Yeah.
That would be so fun. And you could film, you could like record
I would
and film
document the whole thing. I'd get a documentarian and a cult activist and another lawyer who litigates stuff like this, and we would just have a ball. Yeah.
And then you can sell it to Wondery and make like a whole like series on it.
Yeah.
Nippy
why
and
not?
I can narrate it. We can narrate
There
it.
you go.
Like,
You
and
guys.
then Jordan Harbinger goes to the court. September 12th.
There you go.
It would be a dream come true to hold a cult's feet to the fire like this, because you can, what people don't realize, because they're thinking about Scientology, which is like rich and powerful. They're thinking about a lot of these other big cults like this that are like little business cults that have freelance, kooky non-leaders that are run by LifeSpring offshoots. These are not very powerful organizations. They front that way because you'll get a cease and desist letter from a law firm, which is about good enough to wipe your ass with. But like, because I write cease and desist letters here and there. They're pieces of paper with scary words written on them by a lawyer who's not going to do shit unless he gets a retainer from the person who told him to write the letter. So like, you really don't realize that these groups are scared to death of being exposed for what they do. The biggest weapon they have is a cease and desist letter because they're probably not going to sue you. It's expensive. And if you defend yourself and you get the right lawyer's like, I want to make money off this and I'm going to expose this. This person, didn't, and they do not want to go to court because that's public record. And then journalists get involved in like, oh, this sort of weird sort of culty thing is involved in a lawsuit. What's that about? Oh, let's talk to the victim. Maybe I want to publish something about this. Their worst nightmare is these Google results that expose them for what they're doing because it damages the business. What they want is for this to go away.
Absolutely.
Which is why I think Nexium had the approach of don't respond.
Of course.
Until they had to.
Yeah.
Until they are compelled by a judge. Right, exactly.
And they sold that as a noble approach to attacks. It's like, we've been attacked in the media and we haven't been interviewed once. That's because you've denied requests. But they flex that as a noble approach to hate.
Yeah. Keith Raniere used to say, never get in the pigsty and wrestle with a pig because you both get dirty, but the pig likes it.
Right. I'm 90% sure he didn't think of that himself. That's one of those like,
no, for
I
sure.
made that
No.
up, and then it's like a Mark Twain quote.
No, for sure he didn't
But it's
make it
like,
up.
who's the pig?
Yeah. All right, Keith. But who's the pig?
Who's the
exactly.
pig now?
Yeah.
Bitch. Sorry, I had to throw that in there.
Sucker.
Yeah, Sarah.
Well,
Wow.
you don't really have to. I mean, he can't hear this from prison. Zing. So I got something. There we go.
Oh,
nice.
You're so pro.
Yeah, you got to get the soundboard. It really cheeses everything up. So the idea that these, so a lot of these cults, they had this, right? They make you sign a 15-page waiver that says you can't sue them, you can't do this, you can't do that. They know that you are afraid going in because you signed that waiver, and then they'll go, you signed this, you're unethical, and it's against the law if you do this. And it's like, it's not against the law. This is a piece of paper that you had me sign that may or may not be enforceable. And most of the stuff in this contract is just from a legal perspective, was not enforceable. It was stuff like, I will never expose anything in personal or private about what I've experienced here. And it's like, you can make me sign an NDA, but what you can't do is have me literally never talk about this stuff with anybody based on my experience. Like, I won't give away your trade secret, but you can't be like, I'm never going to talk about anything. This is not the Central Intelligence Agency, right? You can't say that I'm damaging you by telling my wife that I felt uncomfortable when you exposed somebody who'd been molested at age 8. This is not, and also that's not illegal. It's called a tort, which is a cause of action, which is like, stealing something is illegal. But me accidentally tearing up your lawn with a runaway remote control car, okay, you can make an argument for trespassing or something like that, but it's not illegal. You just have the cause of action to sue me for the cost of resodding your lawn because my kid screwed up your lawn. Nobody's going to prison over this. And they would try to confuse you with that, like you're going to go to jail for talking about this, when at best they can try to sue you and or settle with you out of court for $0 because there are no damages. And that's a key component of the U.S. tort system. And I'm grossly oversimplifying, but I think most people will understand that these cults, they rely on generating fear. So the longer the waiver and the more they can throw complicated words in front of you to scare you, it's part of the control from the minute you walk in.
Yeah.
Is having you go through this dumb contract and sign everything and initial every page and blah, blah, blah. And I'm striking things through and they're like, oh, you can't come in if you strike things through. And I'm like, cool, I'll just take a refund then. And they're like, well, we can't do that. And I'm like, well, then I can strike things through because you don't get to dictate that I have to sign something. And also you're not giving me my money back. Like you pick. And so
I would have loved to have seen you in a 5-day because there was a 13-page NDA.
Yeah. And I'm just like, not
so
doing that,
long.
not doing that, not doing that, not doing that.
Yeah.
And what's funny is as an attorney, if I ever sign anything and I strike things through and I give the waiver back, usually people go, hey, you crossed that out. And I go, correct. And they're like, it's not my fucking problem. And they put it in the pile with everything else. And they're just like, all right.
That's exactly what I would have done.
Yeah. And they're just like, whatever. So they don't care. And it's funny to see because this group, of course, they looked at it and they were like, you struck all these things through. You have to agree to these. And I was like, I either have to or I have to get a refund. I'll take a refund because these are overly restrictive. Like, this is going to interfere with my business. And she's like, oh, well, I can't give you a refund. And also, you can't strike this through. And I was like, well, you figure that out. I'll be sitting here until I get my money or you agree that this is fine. And they were just like, all right, okay.
You win.
Yeah, like they didn't know what to do because the person working there, I realize now, or not now, but shortly thereafter, she didn't work there. She was free slave labor from their stupid advanced or PhD program. And so she really couldn't do anything. Like nobody in the room had any control over the money, had any control over anything. It was all run by this freelancer dude who was just on the take. And then everybody else was either slave labor or a student. So it was so interesting.
That's the trick. You have these people doing slave labor, taking all this responsibility, but they've got no ownership and skin in the game. So when it comes to situations like with buy-in for what they're doing, to your point, not my fucking problem.
Yeah.
Like, I will not see him or this contract ever again after today.
Right. Right.
And I can remember feeling that way. I was like, dude, that's not my fucking problem.
Yeah. And of course, they're thinking, well, all right, this is probably, we're never going to have to look at this agreement. And as a lawyer, I'm like, worst case scenario, this agreement is going to be the thing that shows up in front of a judge. And if I struck this out and they violated it, then this is on them, because they got it and they should have reviewed it.
That was actually one of the first things that happened when we were decided to be public, is that we were afraid of the NDA, and which not only we signed once, we signed many times. And we also had been saying in the mission statement, what's the line? I will not speak of it or give others knowledge of them outside ESP. I was like what Jordan said. I was like, this shit's not going to matter. But also it was confusing. People would be like at the end of the training, what you want us to bring people, but we can't talk about it. And then we'd be like, no, of course we want you to talk about how great it was, but we don't want you to teach the curriculum to other people because you're going to want to ruin the end of the movie.
Right. And what they mean is, no, we just don't want you to say anything negative because then we can sue you. But if you say positive things, then we're not going to enforce this. Because here's what an NDA is for. If you're in a tech company, they don't want you to say anything about the new AI product that you're developing. They don't want you to go, no, it's going to be awesome. Here's what it does. They don't want that. And they don't want, can you, Matt, look at my boss. He's such a prick. And this AI thing we're developing, yeah, it's great and it's revolutionary, but man, everybody I work with is such an asshole. They don't want any of those things, good or bad. But when these organizations have an NDA, it's we want you to shout from the rooftops how great this is. But the second you say anything bad about the leader, like he's got bad BO and his volleyball thing is stupid, then we're going to sue you. That's not really what NDAs are designed for in many ways. There's non-disparage clauses, which are, of course, for that, but that's usually a part of a lawsuit settlement, like you're parting with partners and it's not good and the best thing for you to do is to separate and not go on smear campaigns against each other. That's a different animal than we're just trying to muzzle you so that you can't get help because we're a coercive organization. A judge will look at that and go, that's not what this was designed for. I'm going to go ahead and not allow you to enforce that in this particular instance. Like, that's not what this is designed for. It's not a muzzle so that the leader can abuse you and then be like, look, you signed a piece of paper that says I can do whatever I want.
Right. Which is what Keith tried to do in many ways. We've heard that he tried to get people to sign agreements about the like one-way monogamy, polyamory bullshit, like even before NXIVM. So he was trying to get it all on paper. Hey there, listener. Hope you're enjoying this episode and that you're remembering to hydrate, stretch, and unclench your jaws. Sometimes listening to conversations about heavy topics can really make you tighten up, you know? And remember, A Little Bit Culty loves you. Also, come hang out with us on Patreon after you finish this episode. It's fun over there. Fun is good. And now, here's a brief message.
Meals bring people together, but for many families, providing their next meal can be a challenge. You can help by participating in Macy's annual Feeding the Hungry food drive. All proceeds go toward local food banks and families. Now through January 31st, you can purchase an icon in-store or online, or watch out for the blue Feeding the Hungry shelf tags, where a portion of your purchase will be donated to local pantries. Together, we can combat hunger in our local communities at Macy's.
This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. What are your self-care non-negotiables? Maybe you never skip leg day or never miss yoga. Maybe it's getting 8 hours of sleep. I mean, that's my personal and everyone's dream, isn't it? Well, I definitely have some non-negotiables. Like, I'm in Vancouver right now and I'm spending literally as much time as I can outside in nature. Hashtag cold pools, hashtag crushing it. Nature is a non-negotiable. Not enough time in the fresh air and the trees around me and I start to feel not great, not myself, not grounded. Therapy day is a bit like my nature walks. I try to not miss it. And I know I'm just going to feel so much better all around if I make it a priority. I get so much out of it. It helps me put my worries and anxieties in their rightful place and helps me clear my mind so I can focus on what I really need and sometimes what I don't need. Like, I don't need to be overbooking myself just because I hate to say no to people. You know what I mean? Thanks, therapy. Thanks for helping me see that. And if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire and get matched with a licensed therapist. And switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Look, even when we know what makes us happy, it's hard to make time for it. But when you feel like you have no time for yourself, non-negotiables like therapy are more important than ever. Never skip therapy day with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/culty today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/culty. From our sponsors.
All right, so I have a question for you. So one of the things I told you when you interviewed us that your interview with Stephen Hassan was one of the first I went to just to put language to what happened to Sarah and I in our situation. And I liked it because you weren't like super like judgy and like I could ever fall for it. And you said you went to this thing and even knowing what you knew with the intel and you knew what you were looking at, you still understood how people had buy-in. So I really appreciated hearing that because the thing that you all struggle with this is how could I be so stupid?
Yeah.
As I've gone through this whole thing, I've recognized it's really about abuse of power. And one of the things that I love to keep our podcast in the lane of is abuses of power and how they're not proprietary to cults. And someone who's been in it, I kind of come out of it with eyes and I see it out in the world, but haven't been conned in the way or fallen for it in the way that I have. And I like to get kind of an objective look of your impression of all the people that have been in cults, their stories, and then how you have seen that in culture and society today, and like whether it be politics, cancel culture, and all those things. What are the parallels and the abuses of power that you see, even in like corporations or whatever, that are most prevalent in your opinion?
Huh, interesting. Yeah, I mean, it's a multi-part question. I think the first part is, it's really easy to look at cults and go, What an idiot. How did they do that? What you have to, and I think you said this on my show, Sarah, but basically nobody goes to a freaking hotel by the airport and goes, I want to get my vagina branded. That's why I'm here. Like you go in going, oh, it's a leadership course. My friend John told me about it, and I'm here with my other buddy Caleb, and we're having a good time, and it's so deep and interesting. And then by the end, you're like, it was a little weird, but stretch my comfort zone. And if you're unaware of the coercive stuff, because you're not studying psychology as a professional pastime/hobby and doing a podcast about it, you go, oh, okay. And you do the advanced course thing, and you're like, this is really powerful. I've never seen anything like this. And you keep going and you go. And then one day, 3 years later, you're like, huh, look at me. I'm in the woods sleeping in a garbage bag with a bunch of people doing a fake Native American ritual that's supposed to something, and I'm slicing my hand open or whatever you're doing, right? I don't know. And because it's the boiling frog, and you're doing it with a bunch of people that also you would think, well, they're not stupid. That guy's a judge. That guy's a doctor. I mean, that's who was in this. And it was an intro seminar, but one of the guys was a family court judge. Another person was that surgeon had signed up for it. He ended up leaving. He wasn't the only doctor there. There was a chiropractor next to me. There was a guy who owned a dental chain of dental things. He was a dentist, but like a successful sort of clinical owner. There's a lot of people in there. It wasn't just all like, it was LA. So there was a lot of like struggling actor people in there too, but it wasn't all like, yeah, I fold towels at a gym and I'm 19 and this is how I'm going to find myself. A lot of it was normal, successful people. So you look around and you go, well, if they're not blowing the alarm, then why would I? So it's really easy to get sucked in there. And I think that that's true for a lot of different organizations, not just coercive cults, but look at business cult type places like multi-level marketing companies. You see all these principles being acted on there. And you see abuses of power in a lot of different places like that. And I think that the other part of your question was a little confusing. You said, where do I see this in society? But what specifically are you referring to?
Like, where do you see culty shit not in like obvious cults? Is that what you mean?
Not obvious cults. And where do you see it most prevalent? Like, if you could articulate and pinpoint what you think the abuses of powers are, how do you see them being applied the most right now in our culture? I have my sense of it, but I'm curious as to what yours is, because you've spoken to a broad spectrum of people, and I'm just curious as to what you think they might be.
This isn't much of a stretch, but I suppose it's a little bit of a stretch, because I see abuses of power and I see abuses of psychological influence on the extreme left and the extreme right. For example, just politically. So you might say, hey, this group, you're a member of this group, so you are aggrieved. And you know this because we're going to rip open all these wounds and we're going to show you a bunch of different sorts of propaganda of examples of your grievance that we're then going to stir up. And then we're going to exacerbate that. And then what we're going to do is leverage that so that you're angry enough to join us because we're going to do something about it. But what we're going to really do is make you buy our shit. Which is like, if you look at extremist groups, a lot of them do harmful things. Like, in other countries, the most extreme ones, they blow things up and they kill people. But a lot of times what extremist groups do is pretty freaking stupid, actually. They make a lot of t-shirts. They make a lot of flags you put on your car. They make a lot of stickers. They make a lot of events where speakers who are influencers in that group go and talk, like flat earth events or whatever. That's not an aggrieved group, but whatever. We'll stick with the left and the right. And they turn it into a grift. It's a money-making endeavor. If you go to an extreme left or an extreme right website, you will see that they sell t-shirts. They sell stickers. They sell tickets to online events. They sell tickets to in-person events. They solicit donations for the cause. And that money, that is not going to lobbying some important guy or gal in Congress. That money is going into the pocket of the leader so he can fly around first class doing important stuff on his way to Cancun for a vacation where he is going to use your money and not get caught. And we see a lot of this stuff with like, we need to build the wall, or we need to make sure that the police are held accountable for all their, senseless murders and stuff. And some of the, there's always a grain of truth into all these little things, which is how you get aggrieved people to part with their cash. But it's ridiculous to me because you will see people that have no money and they will donate it to somebody who's literally a billionaire or claiming to be a billionaire or has $100 million and is the leader of this group, or is at very least making $5 to $10 million a year speaking on the circuit and releasing books and all this other stuff. And it's like, why is your dumb ass uncle, Frank, who can't afford a car payment, donating that money to some kooky influencer? It's ridiculous. And if you tell them they're in a cult, they're like, what are you talking about? Because they don't even see it at all. It's completely invisible. They don't realize they're being grifted by somebody on the left or the right. It's usually an extreme position because those are the people who can say the whole world is against us, which is what creates that feeling of cohesion. And cults love that, right? Everyone's against us. They're out to get us. Scientology does that. NXIVM, I'm sure, did
Us
that.
versus them. Yeah.
And us versus them. And so extreme left and extreme right positions politically also do that. It's us versus them. And you see that with like white nationalists and stuff like that too. It's like, they're coming for us. Are they? Or are they just selling you a bunch of propaganda because then you're going to go buy stuff and virtue signal and go to the conference? And that's really what it is for a lot of these guys.
Pep rallies.
They're pep rallies, but they're expensive.
Yeah.
And then you throw in, you know, the con men and women, the Billy, what's his face from the Fire Festival, and
Oh yeah.
Anna Delvey, and all your episodes on those topics have been for us really enlightening, but also like it's just this whole, the vision I have in my head is like a pinboard with these strings going to tacks to like, you know, it's all so weirdly connected. And I feel like it's a lot of the same people. Like we tried to, when we were in NXIVM, we tried to recruit this guy. I'm not going to say his name, but he was like, he reminded me of the Fire Festival guy. Remember, he always has pictures on volcanoes and he's always like, yeah, you know, like trying to be all like connected to his masculinity. And I don't know, I just glad we didn't recruit him, but just the grift of the tapping into, the grievance is such a great word. The pain of humanity.
Yeah, there's a guy, Peter Boghossian. You heard of him?
Why have I heard of that person? I have
He
heard
was
of that
the
person.
guy who was at Portland State and resigned because he felt like the curriculum was getting too woke or extreme left, and you couldn't. And then it got to the point where I think people were coming in and complaining about his curriculum, and then the administration was siding with him. I mean, not siding with him, siding with the students, and he did a resignation letter, and he's gone around to campuses now, and he calls it grievance ideologies as opposed to principle-based ideologies, and that these grievance ideologies are taking root in a lot of our academia, and he's looking to right the balance. I just heard the term grievance ideologies.
He might be a good guest.
Yeah, I like that. He's been recommended in my show a bunch of times.
Yeah.
He seems like, I don't know much about him, but when I've seen him talk, he seems like a well-spoken dude. I haven't gone down that road just because it's mostly political and I stay away from that stuff on the show.
I agree.
Yeah.
People can't handle the political
So do
thing.
we.
Yeah.
We really try to, because we want to give people the tools to think and like to process. And we specifically say extreme left, extreme right. And then people write us and be like, oh, they're Trumpers. Oh, they're libtards. And I'm like, we specifically,
I get that too.
How do you deal with that?
I got a 2-star review yesterday because somebody was like, he hates conservatives. Listen to him talk about Alex Jones. And I was like, hold on. If you think Alex Jones is a conservative, and for people who don't know, Alex Jones he runs InfoWars. He's the guy who's getting sued for literally $1 billion+ right now because he said that the Sandy Hook shooting, which is a horrible, horrible shooting of elementary school kids in the United States, he said it was a hoax and that everybody who died there was fake and the parents are crisis actors. And he told his fans to harass those people, and one of them committed suicide, and the other ones, their lives have been ruined. They have to hide. They have to quit their jobs. This is after their child was murdered by a psycho, and he refused to take his statements back, so he's getting completely reamed out by a judge, and it's glorious. He's not a conservative. He's a piece of shit, right? He's not a conservative. He's a delusional, narcissistic, possibly a psychopath who doesn't care about anything but grifting people for money. He's not a conservative.
And he's loaded, too.
Yeah, he's loaded. We're not talking about some dude who's like on the other side of the aisle in the Senate here in the United States. And I was just like, wow, if you think Alex Jones is just, quote unquote, an average conservative, then you are so far to the crazy, kooky right wing that there's no reasoning with you. It's like somebody who thinks communism is the best form of government and we should go back to, that wants to live in the Soviet Union. Like, you're not going to reason with this person because they're not coming from a place of even remotely, I wouldn't say good faith, but they're delusional in what they think reality actually is. They're so far from center. It's just unbelievable. And so I don't deal with it is the way. I don't usually talk about politics. I try to stay pretty centric. I have a lot of conservative listeners. They write in all the time about how I'm not judgy of them. So you're going to piss off extremists because the point is extremists by definition, they are on an extreme end of something. And so they disagree with the majority of people who are not on the extreme. They only agree with the people who are on the same side as them. So you can't deal with extremists really other than ignoring them because they will never tolerate you unless you agree with them. That's really what extremism is, right? So if somebody's a white nationalist and they listen to my show, they're going to go, this guy is a piece of crap. And they're going to say that because I'm not a white nationalist, right? So they are only going to agree with somebody who's also a white supremacist. And so unless you start from that position, they are not going to agree with you. So you have to start and finish by saying, welp, guess we're never going to be on the same page. And that's okay because you're not a white nationalist. So it's fine if you don't like me because like you're a kook. And I don't think there's any way around that. Like you're not welcome at the table, period. And that was your choice because you have extreme beliefs. You know, there's certain things that can't be tolerated in civil society, and right wing and left wing extreme, white nationalism or left, social, what do you call it? I don't even know what you call it. It's not even communism. It's like, radical left wing nonsense. You can't tolerate either of those. They're on extremes for a reason. So how do I deal with it? I just fucking ignore those kooky ass people. Who cares?
But they also try and cram words down your mouth. I mean, words down your throat too.
Mm-hmm.
They twist it. I've seen situations, not just me, but like other people, they've basically taken what they've said, misheard it intentionally or not, and made that their justification for maligning them.
It's a grievance ideology. You said something reasonable? What do I latch onto where now I get to be a victim of whatever you did? Right? This person who wrote in goes, obviously hates conservatives. And I'm like, that's funny because I have so many conservatives listening to the show and none of them would agree with that statement. So obviously you either misunderstood something, fair, but probably you willingly grabbed onto something that you wanted to twist because you want to be upset because it's part of your identity that you are a victim of everybody who doesn't agree with you. And that's a grievance ideology, right? So when you see somebody who's on the extreme left or the extreme right, even if they don't identify with the extreme left or the extreme right, they will find something to be upset about because being upset and being a victim and being oppressed are the thing that they identify with. So they actually don't really want the change that they're supposedly advocating for. Their tribal membership, it depends entirely on them being aggrieved. So they never really want this thing to change, whatever it is that they're fighting. That's one of the reasons they're extreme, right? It would be different if they were like, hey, you know what? We really need more white dudes with brown eyes on these committees because it's diversity. And then everybody goes, you know what? You're right. It's entirely women of color. That's completely unfair, whatever. And then you modify the rules a little bit and you let in a white guy and everybody's happy, right? So like, that's a reasonable position to have. Like maybe we should have some women on this committee. Oh yeah, you're right. It's a bunch of white dudes. Let's let in some women because we do need diversity. That's a reasonable position to have. What's not a reasonable position is no white people should work here. We need only this type of person from this specific tribe in Ethiopia can be on this committee. And you're going, we're in Michigan. What are you talking about? This is an unreasonable position to have. And then they go, you're racist. Right? That's what they want to do.
That's what they want to do. And the problem with that is it muddies the waters with actual people who have legitimate ideological complaints, which fucks up the democratic process. Because if you and I are going, hey, listen, there's some racism going on here. Nobody's listening. And you and I want to align ourselves with the principles of human rights or whatever. And the democratic process that we have as citizens is to protest or something like that. If we're in bed with people who are extreme, which oftentimes happens, the principle that you and I are trying to uphold gets leveraged by extremists. And now we are rubbing elbows with people who we don't want to be rubbing elbows with. And there's the flaw with sometimes the democratic process because other people are just leveraging it. I
agree.
And that's the confusion people have. So if I say something pro someone, which has happened in the past, they automatically I'm in bed with, I assume I'm aligned with the extreme version of that. And I'm like, whoa. Let's have the good faith conversation.
Well, more importantly, that you're anti somebody else who's on the opposite side.
Yes.
So if I say something like, I really like what Trump said about China, people go, you piece of crap right-wing a-hole. And I'm like, wait a minute, what are you talking about? Right. And if I'm like, well, Joe Biden is not the worst president and people want to give him a lot of shit, but he's really not as bad as people say. They're like, you are a libtard. And it's like, wait a minute, maybe And hear me out
Yeah.
here. I'm just reasonable and I'm in the middle and it's not black or white.
Yeah.
Right.
Just, you know,
It's
think
never
about that for a
black or
second.
white.
And they don't want to do that. They don't want to do that. They want to take an extreme side because it's easier. It's frankly, if you are simple-minded, it's easier to paint everything in broad black and white strokes because then you have good guys and bad guys, white hat and black hat, and everybody who doesn't disagree with you, everybody who doesn't agree with you is an enemy. And that's a much easier, simplified worldview that you can have, especially if you're a fucking idiot. So it pays for people who have low IQ to join what they would never admit is a cult. I can't believe how much I'm swearing on this
That's
episode.
okay.
It's kind of
Yeah,
It's
it's
so
fine.
great.
it's a little liberating.
It's good. Welcome to A Little Bit Culty. But you take that what you just said and add social media and the algorithm, which then of course curates the information, and you're in your own little echo chamber, and you don't get anything outside of that. It's interesting. I just did a podcast the other day where I was kind of saying something similar, and I was like, when people say that they're the opposite of me politically or they're very different, and I'm in the South now, so there's a real range, especially in Atlanta, right? There's like extreme on all ends, and I just want to talk to everybody. I just want to be like, well, it's so different than how I think. Tell me what that's like. Like and I want to ask questions, and this person was like, well, I just am going to cut them out because it's against my values. And I'm like, but then we're never going to learn from each other. Like this is the divisiveness right now is so painful. And I just, that's what I say. That's what I feel is culty.
On that note, I agree with you that you touched on something that I was actually going to end with here because I had lunch with my mom yesterday and she said, oh, it's a shame. My friend passed away. And I said, oh, that is a shame. And she goes, we didn't talk for the last year, even though we used to email every day. And I said, why? Was she sick? And she goes, no. I said something about that we don't need a border wall because most of the immigrants that are here, they come in legally and they overstay their visas. And I was like, okay, but then why don't you talk anymore? And she's like, that's why. She stopped talking to me after that. And I was like, huh? So we fleshed that out a little bit. And it occurred to me that if somebody says something to you and you disagree with it, and it's not a completely ridiculous extremist position that they have stated, then you are in a cult if you stop and you isolate yourself from that person. Like if somebody says, I just don't like the way that black people look and I feel like they're all dumb. You are a crazy racist, okay? You're a crazy, crazy racist and people should probably stop being friends with you if you say that, okay? But if you say something that is sort of in the middle of the road and people disagree with you and they isolate themselves from you, they are in a cult. And it doesn't have to be a formal organization. It can simply be a belief system that is causing them to isolate themselves from anybody who is not as extreme as them. And so if you're doing that to other people, you are in a cult, and you should probably take a good hard look at the people you're surrounding yourself with, the media you're consuming, and the reason you think certain things. Because it would be very difficult to assume that somebody saying, well, I'm not sure about this and I'm not sure about that is an extremist position. If somebody says something like that and your instinct is to cut them off forever, you need to examine your own positions because you might be the extremist, which means you might be the one who's in a cult. Because when I disagree with somebody, I don't stop talking with them forever.
Yeah.
If they're a close friend of mine.
Yep.
That's not my course of action.
Yeah.
And
Shunning.
if that's your course of action, you are in a cult.
Shunning is a number one telltale sign of cult behavior, right? Cutting off.
Yeah, exactly. And so when people see that or somebody is encouraging them to do that, then you're in a cult, right? Like you're in a cult. If you go to a group and you go, my friends don't really want me to sign up for these courses. They think they're dumb. And the person teaching the course goes, that's understandable. We do a lot of weird stuff here. Your friends will come around, but they don't have to join. This can be a thing you do. It's a hobby. You can meet them afterwards. That's normal. If the person says, anybody who doesn't support you coming to this self-help seminar is a bad person and you shouldn't talk to them anymore because their negative energy is going to rub off on you, you're in a cult.
Worse, it's going to affect your chakras.
Right. It's going to unalign your chakras and their juju is going to infect you and then it's going to infect the group and we can't have that. So you have to ditch them as you can't talk to your mom anymore. Sorry, I don't make the rules. On that note, I gotta go.
I was going to say,
Jordan,
thank
thanks
you
a
for your
lot.
time.
That was great.
We had other things, but this conversation was awesome.
Thank you, Jordan.
Jordan, thank you so much for coming. Always a treat to talk to you. So much fun. I love the cussing. I love your personal life examples. Our audience is going to love this, and we appreciate the time. And come back whenever if you experience more culty shit out in your world.
You got it. Yeah, it's funny. I've dropped more F-bombs in this episode than I usually do in a given quarter. So here we are.
We're
my
going to
quota.
call the episode F-bomb.
Yeah, a little bit bleeping culty.
Thanks, Jordan.
Thanks, Jordan.
Thank you.
Honestly, I think the main thing I would say that I gleaned from this is that what he shared with us is almost verbatim to what other people have shared with us about such a variety of different groups that teach personal and professional development, whether it's Schmanmark, Nexium, LifeSpring, blah, blah, blah. It's really, they have the same problems, and these types of abuses of power are so ripe. And I'm so glad that Jordan was able to spot the red flags. But also what's cool about him is that it gave him the requisite compassion or empathy. Like when he had us on his show, I felt like he was able to see how it could happen. And that was such a treat.
And necessary, because a lot of people feel shame when they leave these things. So Jordan, thank you to you and for all that you do.
We just love learning from him. He's just really set the bar high. So thanks, Jordan, for coming on our show. Thanks to his wife, Jen, for helping us set up the alarm system that we got through Jordan's sponsors. He's got a lot of sponsors. He's, podcast goals, guys.
14 years.
Yes. We all hope to be as successful as Jordan Harbinger. You can listen to the Jordan Harbinger Show wherever you listen to podcasts.
Jordan offers a free 6-minute networking workshop, which you can check out in the show notes. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and it's not one of those things where you sign up for free and then you're like hooked into this other thing. He really just wants to offer it for free, and that's awesome. Don't forget to follow us over on Patreon, social media, leave us a review. We are having a lot of fun over there, by the way. We are going to be releasing some very special nuggets. You don't want to miss it. Hashtag FOMO. Bye.
Sinking down to the depths of the ocean. I'm hanging on to the weight of my love. If I let go of it all, I could leave, but I know I won't.
Hope you like this episode. Let's keep the conversation going and come hang out with us on Patreon, where we keep the tape rolling each week with special episodes just for Patreon subscribers and where we get deep into the weeds of unpacking every episode of The Vow.
And if you're looking for our show notes or some sweet, sweet swag or official ALBC podcast merch or a list of our most recommended cult recovery resources, visit our website at alittlebitculty.com.
And for more background on what brought us here, check out Sarah's page-turning memoir. It's called Scarred. True story of how I escaped Nexium, the cult that bound my life. It's available on Amazon, Audible, narrated by my wife, and at most bookstores.
A Little Bit Culty is a Talkhouse podcast and a Trace 120 production. We're executive produced by Sarah Edmondson and Anthony Nippy Ames, with writing, research, and additional production support by senior producer Jess Tardy. We're edited, mixed, and mastered by our rocking producer Will Rutherford of Citizens of Sound, and our amazing theme song, Cultivated, is by John Bryant and co-written by Nigel Asselin. Thank you for listening.